What happens when a prison becomes a slow-motion death sentence? In Russia's far north, punishment isn't just legal, it's elemental. The wind cuts like glass, the night never ends, and the names alone feel like warnings carved into ice. Black Dolphin, Polar Wolf, Polar Owl, Fire Island. These aren't myths or film titles. They're fortresses buried in tundra, where solitary confinement, sleep deprivation, and ritualized humiliation are sharpened by sub-zero air. Imagine standing for 16 hours, each day while guards check every 15 minutes. Picture thin uniforms under Arctic winds, water cannons turning breath into frost. Here, survival is not guaranteed, sanity even less. If this already makes your skin tighten, you're not alone. Tell me, have you ever felt cold that reached your bones? Multiply it by a winter that doesn't end. Former inmates describe torture, forced labor, and cells with painted radiators, illusions of warmth in places built to break the will. Even high-profile prisoners aren't spared. The rulebook reads like a blueprint for erasing identity. In these colonies, human rights become negotiable, and the landscape itself polices every step. This isn't about sensationalism. It's about understanding the machinery, how architecture, weather, and fear interlock to create a system where "don't move" can mean "don't live." If a detail here rings familiar or shocks you, note it for later. Your perspective matters as much as any headline. Because to navigate a world like this, we need more than outrage. We need clarity. And with that, let's step past the gate, into corridors where breath fogs, rules harden, and the cold starts making choices for you. Close your eyes and picture this. What if the walls meant to contain? Justice became weapons themselves. What if stepping into a cell meant not just losing your freedom, but watching your very body and mind be dismantled piece by piece? In Russia's most notorious prisons, punishment is not simply a legal consequence. It is a slow, grinding sentence written into the climate, the architecture, and the daily rituals of survival. Here, the cold is not a backdrop, it's an executioner. At places like Black Dolphin, Polar Wolf, Polar Owl, and Fire Island, even breathing feels like defiance. These names sound like legends whispered around campfires, but they are real fortresses hidden in the tundra, where frostbite lurks like a second warden, and despair is woven into the air. Imagine standing 16 hours a day, forbidden to lean against the wall. Imagine the sting of ice water pouring down your back while the Arctic wind turns your skin to stone. Imagine isolation so deep that silence itself becomes a scream in your head. And yet, these prisons are not just about cages and chains. They are stages where power is performed daily, guards exerting dominance with whispers, prisoners trading scraps of food as if they were currency of life itself, and political dissidents reduced to shadows so their voices cannot escape the walls. If this strikes something inside you, share it in the comments. What part of this reality unsettled you most? Your perspective matters, because each comment adds another voice against silence. And if these stories move you, a simple like helps spread them further, while subscribing ensures you're here with us every time we uncover another hidden truth. This community exists because of that bond. Your presence is what turns a video into a movement. So stay close, because what we're about to explore isn't just about prison life. It's about human survival at the edge of sanity. The question isn't only whether one can endure the cold. The real question is, how do you keep the fire inside alive when the world outside is built to extinguish it? Close your eyes and imagine this. A place where punishment is not a verdict, but a rhythm, beating against the body every waking hour. Welcome to Black Dolphin, Russia's most infamous maximum security prison, home to over 700 men who will never walk free again. Murderers, terrorists, cannibals, each one locked inside a fortress where even time itself has been weaponized. Here, inmates are forced to stand for 16 hours straight, never leaning against a wall, never allowed to surrender to exhaustion. Guards pass by every 15 minutes, not out of routine, but as a reminder that even rest is forbidden. The cells are stripped of comfort, and exercise takes place in cages under the sky, while officers tear through belongings as though dismantling the last shreds of dignity. It's more than confinement. It is a system designed to grind a human spirit into dust. And within these walls lived Vladimir Nikolayev, the so-called cannibal killer, who not only took lives but turned flesh into grotesque meals, feeding it to his own family and selling it in local markets. Imagine the silence of the night in Black Dolphin, knowing the man beside you once tasted his victims as casually as others would eat bread. This is why Black Dolphin is not just a prison, but a stage where horror plays on repeat, where the cold air gnaws at skin, the rules bend the body into permanent submission, and history's darkest crimes breathe in the next cell over. And yet, even here, survival demands adaptation. Because in a world where the clock becomes your executioner, the question lingers: how long can a mind endure when every second is sharpened into a blade? Picture the Arctic wind cutting straight through bone, a silence so heavy it feels like punishment itself. This is Polar Wolf, a prison not only guarded by walls and men, but by the raw cruelty of nature. Here, punishment is carved into the skin by -50-degree air and etched into the mind through months of isolation. Prisoners are marched outside in thin layers, their bodies stiff against the cold, forbidden to clap their hands for warmth. A single twitch, a single attempt to move, and the entire group is blasted with freezing water, turning the air into shards of ice that cut deeper than any blade. In summer, it is no kinder. Swarms of mosquitoes descend like an army, and even brushing them away risks collective reprisal. It is a place where survival means surrendering to extremes. The prison does not just break bones, it freezes hope. And within these walls stood Alexei Navalny, the political dissident who endured almost 300 days in solitary confinement. Imagine counting hours in darkness, where time itself is a predator. His letters described whispers through the door, threats meant to seep under the skin, stripping away dignity one word at a time. In this frozen theater of control, silence becomes the loudest weapon, and the cold, the most loyal executioner. Polar Wolf is not just a prison. It is a mirror of a system that wields climate as chains and isolation as daggers. Now imagine trying to breathe in such a place, to keep your mind intact when even the air feels like betrayal. If you had to write a single word on a prison wall to remind yourself that you are still alive, what would that word be? Imagine a man whose voice shook the foundations of a regime, locked away where even the sun rarely dares to rise. Alexei Navalny's imprisonment inside the Arctic fortress was not only about walls and guards, it was about erasing a voice that refused to be silenced. His diaries, smuggled out and later published in Patriot, reveal the anatomy of psychological warfare. Sleep deprivation so relentless that night lost meaning, showers of freezing water delivered not for hygiene, but for humiliation, and guards whispering threats through iron doors to keep the mind frayed and trembling. Navalny's fight was not against chains alone, but against invisibility. While his body endured confinement, his words traveled beyond the frostbitten corridors, echoing the brutality of a system designed to make dissenters vanish without leaving scars. In February 2024, his death behind bars became both tragedy and a symbol, a reminder that in Russia's coldest prisons, punishment often wears the mask of silence. Yet his presence lingers, like a voice carried on the wind, defying the walls that sought to bury it. This contrast is the heart of his story. A regime that weaponized cold, isolation, and despair to extinguish resistance, and a man who, even when broken physically, refused to surrender the idea that truth could still survive. Navalny's struggle is a haunting metaphor, a body caged in permafrost, but a voice that still refuses to freeze. Now I wonder, if you had to leave one sentence behind, knowing it might be your last message to the world, what would you write? Imagine walking into a prison where even the walls play tricks on you. At Polar Owl, also called the Siberian Soul-Crusher, some cells have radiators painted on the walls, mock illusions designed to give a false sense of warmth, while the Arctic air cuts through your lungs like shards of glass. Here, punishment is not just physical, it's psychological theater. Inmates describe unbearable cold, meager food that barely sustains life, and guards who enforce their power with brutality cloaked as routine. Reports tell of torture that surpasses icy hoses, beatings that leave bones aching for months, sexual abuse whispered about in survivor testimonies, and humiliation so methodical it feels engineered to erase the human spirit. Ex-prisoners call it a place where survival means layering scraps of cloth, newspapers, or even plastic just to trap a hint of body heat. The cold isn't just climate, it's another guard, one you cannot see, one you cannot escape. The environment itself conspires with the regime, turning nature into an accomplice. And then comes the silence. No voices, no defense, just the sound of your own breathing against walls that seem to lean closer each night. The 2018 Yaroslavl case, where video evidence exposed guards torturing inmate Yevgeny Makarov, ripped the mask off a broader pattern. Lawyers like Irina Biryukova, who dared to challenge the system, faced death threats and exile. If that's what happens outside the walls, imagine the terror inside them. At Polar Owl, the real sentence is not years or decades. It's the slow erosion of hope. The prison doesn't just hold bodies. It drains the will to imagine freedom. Now I want to hear from you. If you had to endure a place where even the walls lied to you, what single word would capture the feeling? Fire Island, officially, Volgodsky Piatak, rises from icy waters like a fortress carved from punishment itself. They call it Russia's Alcatraz, but that nickname almost feels too romantic for a place so bleak. Surrounded by frozen lakes and shifting ice, escape here is not just unlikely, it's suicidal. Guards arrive by snowmobile, supplies come across the ice, and the walls breathe with the cold. Overcrowding turns cells meant for 2 into cages for 4, every breath steeped in the stench of sewage from toilets carved into the floor. Food is so scarce that cigarettes become currency, traded for scraps as if survival could be measured in ash. Inside, the real terror wears a human face. Andrei Golovatyov, known as the Apartment Maniac, sits among the condemned. Between 1996 and 2000, he murdered at least 14 people, using charm to enter homes before unleashing violence that left Russia horrified. Imagine trying to sleep, knowing a man like that is your neighbor, separated only by rusted bars and thin walls that echo with whispers at night. In Fire Island, trust is a weapon and betrayal is the only constant. Even soap or warm clothing becomes a chess piece in a brutal game of survival, where every exchange carries risk. And yet in this frozen prison, a strange order emerges. Survival is not just about enduring the cold. It's about knowing who controls the corridors, memorizing the rhythm of steps in the dark, and understanding when silence is safer than words. In such a place, what single object or memory from the outside world would you cling to just to remind yourself you were still human? When you look at Black Dolphin, Polar Wolf, Polar Owl, and Fire Island together, you see more than prisons. You see monuments to punishment itself. Places where walls are built not only to hold bodies, but to erase dignity, to freeze hope, to grind the human spirit into silence. These institutions are not simply correctional facilities. They are reminders that in Russia, punishment does not end with a sentence. It lingers in the marrow, in the breath, in the echo of each locked door. Even when the prisoner survives, a part of their humanity does not. And this machine spares no one. Brittney Griner, a global sports icon, found herself caught in the gears of this system. Her fame didn't shield her from the same stripped-down rations, the same harsh labor, the same suffocating isolation. If a world champion can be reduced to just another inmate, what chance does an ordinary person have? That is the chilling truth. In these prisons, silence becomes deadlier than any weapon because it doesn't just end a life, it buries the very idea of being heard. If this journey struck something inside you, I'd love to know. Write in the comments. Even silence can kill. It's a phrase that carries the weight of what we've uncovered together, and your voice here helps keep these stories alive. If the video moved you, a simple like shows me it reached you, and subscribing ensures you stay close as we uncover more truths hidden in the shadows. There's another story waiting, one that deepens this reflection. There's a video right here on the side. Click and continue with me there.